Hey everyone, it's Don. I'm here on a windy November 5th, 2024 to visit Indian Mound Reserve in Cedar Cliff Falls near Cedarville, Ohio. So let's go. After descending down from the parking area at Cedar Cliff Falls, let's take a look at what you see pretty immediately after you depart your car. So what this park is built around the presence of Cedar Falls, Massey's Creek Gorge, and large Indian Mound and Native American earthworks, other earthworks. And so what we're going to take a look at first is Cedar Falls. I'll give you several angles of this. It's been very dry, so these falls are certainly not as impressive as they could be. But that is not a natural fall, that's a dam. And there was once a mill on this creek. This is Massey's Creek, and this mill was a flour mill back in the 1800s. I believe the mill was set over here somewhere on the south side of the gorge. And of course, that mill pond up there theoretically was as deep as you can see here, but it's probably quite filled with sediment at this point. But that was the mill pond that then, you know, drove the water wheel of the flour mill, which is long gone. So that's a natural stone dam, an artificial stone dam, but it makes for a scenic view nonetheless. And so there have been a lot of infrastructure improvements in this park in the last decade, including these nice boardwalks and bridges that let you access this park really easily. And so this is just a little picnic spot. Here we're looking downstream through the gorge, and we'll walk through portions of this here shortly. But again, we're in limestone territory again, so that's limestone bedrock that's been carved by Massey's Creek, which is named after Nathaniel Massey, who was an Ohio frontiersman in the late 1700s, early 1800s, you know, rose up, I think started as a surveyor, became a soldier and a politician, and founded many towns throughout Ohio, including Chillicothe, which became the state's first capital. And so this is Massey's Creek, and the town of Cedarville is just upstream, not even half a mile. Okay, this town of Cedarville would begin. Okay, so this is again, a pretty regularly visited spot. I have seen videos of people jumping off of that cliff into the water below, which you are not allowed to do, but I think people still do that. But in any case, this is Massey's Creek Gorge, and your first stop along the way. So what I'm going to do is cross that bridge you see in the distance, take another view of the falls, maybe from the other side, and then go downstream to some of the more natural highlights and work my way to the Indian Mound itself and talk about that and anything else we see along the way. Here's another view of the Harbison Mill Dam, looking upstream, up the dark waters of Massey Creek down there. So I believe those falls are that dam is about 20 feet tall, 18 to 20 feet tall. And again, it's been very dry, so they're not rushing very strongly, but I have seen those things just showing tremendous power, force. Now that dam, on the other hand, has been tough. That dam has been there for, 150 years maybe? And it stayed put through all forms of weather. So I'm on the little bridge that I showed you from above, and here's a downstream view. Okay. And so let's take a walk down that way and see what we see. Here's a view of Cedar Falls from the north side of Massey's Creek. So this is a bridge that was built a few years ago. Takes you right up close to the dam itself to get an overview of its construction and depth. So you can see the arch design that was used with the arch pointing upstream, which adds to the strength of the dam. And like I said, that dam's been around for over 100 years, withstanding everything that was thrown at it. So it's done quite well. And again, that pool above was that deep at some point. Right now, I don't know how deep that pool is. My guess it's only half that deep or less after all those years, because it just does, that sediment just not flush at all. Okay, so there's our falls. And sort of like I said, I have seen pictures of people launching off the edge of these stones into the water, which is illegal, but I think people still sneak in to do that once in a while. Okay, onward. I've walked downstream several hundred yards, and you reach a little intersection here where you can continue on the rim of the gorge or take steps down to Massey's Creek. So we will do that and go down along the creek and see what we see in that direction. But before I do that, I want to point out a couple things. One is that, I guess one kind of unfortunate thing about this park is that the Cedarville water treatment facility is right adjacent to it, and the outflows from their treatment process flow into the creek in the gorge here. So that's kind of unfortunate, but what can you do? The other thing I want to point out that becomes very obvious this time of year is an emerging invasive species in this area. Okay, we know about Amur honeysuckle. I've pointed that out countless times in my series. But this species here, which people might recognize from their own yard or you know, just in town, is winged burning bush. And so this thing doesn't belong here. This was planted ornamentally, very widely, very popularly. It's called burning bush because of what you see in front of me here. These very bright red, pink leaves in the fall. But unfortunately, this species is spreading into natural areas. And you can really see it this time of year because of these red leaves. And I'm seeing it out in front of me here and down into the gorge a little bit. This species is considered an emerging invasive species. And I had a student study the impacts of this species on insect and spider diversity and, you know, insect performance and so forth. And so it is increasingly showing up in natural areas where it shouldn't be. And so it's kind of next on the list of invasives to be perhaps managed and maybe even banned for sale. But it's extremely popular, so it's going to be a tough sell. All right, so let's head down into the gorge here. I'm going to grab my cup of coffee that I set on the post over here and see what we see down there. Again, this is a limestone gorge. There's more burning bush right there in front of us. Okay, the red leaves. So these are narrow, pretty narrow stairs here, concrete steps. And it'll get us down into the gorge proper. It's a lot quieter down here for sure. A lot cooler. Interesting little species you find on cliff walls, like this little thing. That's a spleenwort, which is sort of like a micro fern. They very commonly cling to cliffs, like damp, cool, moist locations. So those are spleenworts. There's several species of those in this area. All right, now we're down into the gorge proper. Take a look around. Okay, there's a portion of this gorge called Cedar Falls proper, and we'll get to that down below where we are right now. So I actually these stairs just lead you down here to take a look, but you really can't go anywhere once you get here. There are other access points to the gorge downstream. So let's go find those and take a look at what's the formal Cedar Falls area. Here's just another little overlook before we head down into the gorge. That gorge is about 30 or 40 feet deep at this point. And here's an access point right over here. And so just a bit about the trees since we talk about that. We've got all of our typical Ohio species, like here's a black cherry. We've got red oaks in front, and of course white oaks. Some of the bigger and older trees are white oaks and chinkapin oaks in this area. And so often along cliff edges and gorges you have quite old trees, partly because they were hard to access for, you know, logging operations. So this is a large chinkapin oak in front of me there. That's about 2.5 to 3 feet in diameter, probably at least a 200-year-old tree. There's another, can't quite tell. Oh, that was an ash. It looks like it's dead, okay, which I would expect an ash of that size to be dead, unless it was a blue ash, which we do have in this particular park area. Okay, so I'm taking what's called the gorge trail now, so I'm dropping back down again. We're gonna follow this a ways, see what we can see down here. And here we're gonna skirt along the base of this cliff. And we're a little bit removed from the Massey's Creek at the moment. We'll get back over there. More burning bush showing its face this time of year. For a lot of invasives, fall's a good time to find them and treat them because they make themselves known. So most of our deciduous trees are losing their leaves quite a bit right now. If you look up there, things like honeysuckle are still here, quite green, revealing their presence very clearly so you can target them for removal. Now, you get in a site like this, everything you see green is honeysuckle. It's a monumental task, but you know, it is worth trying to do in important locations. And well, even more so, more broadly, but it's just difficult to do at a very large scale. But I see lots of burning bush all throughout here. Those would be more easily targeted because they are fewer and farther between, but that wouldn't continue if they stay. So I see them all throughout this gorge and could really be found and targeted for treatment. Here's a little species I think I'll point out to you. No, I won't. Never mind. Okay, what I did want to point out to you down here is that, if I can find it, yeah, it's just ahead of us here, is the town near here is called Cedarville. We're going to take a look at what's known as Cedar Falls here shortly. That implies the presence of cedars, right? And so we are about 5 miles or so from Clifton Gorge, which has a robust population of white cedars, kind of outside of their normal range. And these gorges maintain cooler temperatures for those species to be able to thrive. And so you can find them here outside of places where they'd normally be found. So here at Cedar Falls and Cedarville, right in front of us is, I think, the only couple of individuals of white cedar in this entire gorge. So they're the last remnants of what I assume was a larger white cedar population at one time. And so, you know, hopefully they can hang on right up there at the cliff edge, clinging to the sides of the cliff. Okay, in front of us. So I don't know exactly how many individuals are there. They're probably quite closely related to each other, being just so close together and maybe even offshoots of each other. So here's some of the branches hanging down. Okay, so there's a few over there showing really dramatic gravitropism. So let's take a look at that. This is an interesting spot here. where the creek through time had worn out this rock shelter, basically here, underneath the cliff. These are softer layers down here than up there, which are more dolomitic limestone. But there used to be a walkway across the top of these concrete blocks here. And there was kind of, you know, the trail basically took you across this walkway. Now you just walk either along the creek here or at the base of that cliff. And so there's a few more white cedars up above me here. Okay, and there's some real dramatic examples of gravitropism, the idea that plants will, when they're battling the forces of gravity, will right themselves. They sense the direction of gravity's pull, and they'll right themselves. So that one in front of me is basically done a 180. It's completely turned around. It was hanging down, and as it was growing, as a youngster, it turned around from the growing tip and pointed back upward, and has been growing straight back up ever since. You can see that same thing above me here. Once again, the kind of things you try to mimic in bonsai. Bring that up just about every time. So these are the remaining few white cedars of Cedarville and Cedar Falls. So hopefully they can hang on in this one cliff. Okay, so let's go and find Cedar Falls proper, take a look at that, and then work my way to Indian Mound. Just some more shots of the gorge from this little access bridge. It's been relatively recently built. Taking a look at the little white cedar population that remains. That's all that remains near Cedarville, and then points downstream. Okay, so let's keep moving. The plant you see in front of me now with the red leaves was a nice occurrence. Okay, I'm glad to have found this. So it looks a lot like that burning bush, right, that I showed you, the non-native species that's becoming an emerging invader. This is a native relative. This is called wahoo. Yes, wahoo. The genus is euonymus for both of those species. And here's actually a fruit of wahoo. It's a very unique sort of a four-pointed fruit. Makes nice bright red flowers in the fall. Has greenish twigs. They're round. Okay, you'll notice that the branches and stems on this are completely round, although greenish. Okay, now here's the winged burning bush I showed you, just to give you an idea, side by side. Much smaller leaves, and the stems tend to have these little wings on them. Okay, so this is winged burning bush, the non-native species, just in comparison there to wahoo, our native species. You can see the difference in leaf size, and again, roundish stems compared to these winged stems, these angled stems. Okay, but otherwise they do look similar. They both turn nice and bright red in the fall, but this is one we want, okay, wahoo, and we don't want winged burning bush. So that was a nice find. Here's one for the fungal fanatics. This is one that I've seen recently in a number of places. This is dryad saddle, or pheasant back fungus. This is a polypore shelf fungus, and it is edible, particularly when it's young. Okay, the polypore nature comes from the porous underside of the fungus. Rather than having a gilled appearance, it has pores. So it's a polypore, and it has these very characteristic brownish scales, okay, called pheasant back, again because it looks like, well, the feathers of a pheasant on its back, right? Also known as dryad saddle. All right, so there you go. All right, we're gonna head toward Williamson Mound now. Well, couldn't get out of here without some other additional fun finds. So this is obviously a shed snake skin. I cannot tell what this is. We're up some distance from the creek. I guess would be a black rat snake, but I am not sure. It's At this stage, very hard to see any patterning or anything on it. So, but that's last year's coat on with fall fashions. As you walk throughout this area, you have your requisite floodplain species like sycamore. It's American sycamore in front of me with those upper stems and branches that look like deer antlers. Okay, but there's still a nice population of blue ashes in this area. So this tree in front of me, this sizable tree, is an ash that survived emerald ash borer. I've told this story several times because of its lack of attraction of the adults to lay their eggs on it, and it's somewhat more resistance to the larvae if they do. So this is a pretty sizable tree, still in good health as far as I can tell. I don't see a single exit hole from adult emerald ash borers on it, at least at this point in the trunk. Could be some up there, but it's still alive. Of course, it's lost all its leaves for the year, but always a pleasant sight to see given the damage that beetle has wrought. All right, now as you walk through this area, you will come across, we're basically now in a floodplain area where it widens out, the gorge widens out, and here we reach the intersection of, I've been walking on the gorge trail. I started on the rim trail, so if you go in that direction, you get up onto the rim, and then you can walk the whole way back up to the Harbison Mill Dam where I started. So we're gonna head in this direction to get to the Mound, Williamson Mound. Now when you do that, you notice you're walking on these, what look like levees or dams, earthen dams. There's a low spot over here. It's lower on that side toward the creek. And I, for a long time, had no idea what these were here for, until I consulted a map and I realized these were settling ponds. These were likely settling ponds for the water treatment facility some time ago. And of course now with the modern treatment methods, these settling ponds have long been abandoned, but that's what you'll notice in this particular area. This is a small tributary to Massey's Creek that flows through this area where the settling ponds were. So if you look right to where the steps are in front of me, that goes up onto the settling pond dam. And there were about 3 of these ponds through here. And one thing you could see along the banks of this little tributary is the earthen banks. Completely, no rock, like we were walking through the limestone gorge over there, all soil. Okay, and that's all stuff that has settled out, that settled out in these settling ponds during the time they were active. Okay, so a lot of those are biosolids from human waste, I hate to say. But you can see an earthen bank ahead of me that's 6 feet thick at least, okay, with this stream running through and past it. All right, so I don't know when these settling ponds were abandoned, but it's just interesting, you know, that's not on any signage here. You have to kind of figure that out once you realize these were settling ponds. Okay, in any case, we're at the intersection where you head up to the Williamson Mound. So I think I'll just keep the camera running as we approach that. It's about a quarter mile up this trail. And there are several parking areas in this park system, I think 3. This is a park managed by the Greene County Park System in Ohio. And this particular mound ahead is called Williamson Mound. And I think that was a family that owned the property and donated part of it for this park. And I think they started preservation efforts, I think around in the 1920s, because of this unique site. So let's go see it. Well, here's our requisite signage at the Williamson Mound. This is a mound of the Adena culture, built over 2,000 years ago. It's about 30 feet tall, 30 to 40 feet tall. And it's, you know, a tenth of a mile in front of me there. We'll walk up to it. But it's thought that a lot of that mud and stone was brought out of the stream bottom to build that mound. So they had to haul that up there in baskets and such And it has stood for 2,000 years. I'm sure there's been some erosion, right? But when I first came here 25 years ago or so, this field in front of me was managed as a prairie at that time, had been planted in prairie vegetation, but I see it was not managed. I've talked about this many times as well. When you cease managing a prairie, this is what you get after 20 years. Okay, woody plant encroachment. So in here are our colonizing species like black locusts, amber honeysuckle. There were ashes in there that colonized quickly. I see a handful of maples. I guess there are a couple oaks in there. But that's what happens. That's why you have to manage a prairie, because trees will take it over if you don't. So I see there's a couple people up on the mound. I'll let them have their piece as I approach, and then I will join you once I get my turn. Looks like I have the mound all to myself, so let's take a walk and see what we see up there. I should note that today is yet another one of these exceptionally warm days for November 5th. It's about 70 degrees right now. I think it's going to be warmer than that quite a bit. And so I should not be out here sweating on November 5th as I walk around. I should be wearing a jacket and all that kind of stuff. But this is our new normal, I guess. So here's the mound. You can see it's just basically planted with mostly perennial ryegrass and mowed occasionally. So here's a commemorative plaque to commemorate David Williamson, who donated 124 acres to found this park. And this was made in 1933. And very appropriately, it was set on a glacial erratic, big chunk of granite that they undoubtedly found in the area that the glaciers thankfully brought here from Canada just for this. So let's take a walk up here. When I first came here, there was some crude steps just kind of chopped into the mound itself. This nice wooden walkway was built probably 5 or 8 years ago maybe. And so, as I mentioned, this mound's about 30 to 40 feet tall. From what I understand, it was never investigated, excavated, and studied, at least not scientifically speaking. It's assumed that this was just a lookout mound, which I guess were not uncommon. So here we are, top of Williamson Mound. So I'm looking north at this point. Okay, so let's just circle around here. There's north. Now we're heading east. That's basically south. And then the west. Now, who knows what the woods looked like back then, but it's quite likely this was dense forest. So, you know, when people were developing this area as a park and such, all these trees would have been cut. This probably was mostly agricultural. It still is agricultural in the distance, if you can see. So it might have made it appear that this was a lookout mound. But in reality, this would have been densely forested with large trees. I just don't see that it would have been effective as a lookout mound in that kind of setting. It's just plunked here in the middle of the woods. It's not on a particularly high point. You know, the land is higher above, up in that direction, north of here. My guess is it's more ceremonial. It does not appear to have been a burial mound, however. But, you know, people have debated, and I think they've mostly settled on a lookout mound, which, as I said, doesn't make complete sense to me. But that's just my opinion. That's the opinion of the naturalist. So what we have around here, again, are trees in this area aren't particularly big or old. Things that colonize abandoned agricultural fields and such. A lot of black locusts in this area. So I see a lot of that. I see mulberries out there. The plants with the leaves still on them are mulberries. Some maples, a few oaks and black walnuts, but mostly trees that would be colonizers. All right, so here we are, Williamson Mound. It's too warm for today, and it's breezy. At least it's pleasant. So I think what I'll do is, from atop the mound, I'll conclude this episode right here. So this is the Naturalist signing off for this week, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.